Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the November 19th, 2024 Bellevue City Council meeting. Thank you for being here tonight. Before we begin, I'll just say a few words about participating and attending our council meetings. We ask that the individuals do not disrupt the meeting, and by that I mean talking out of turn or without permission, interrupting or making sounds when someone else is talking, or approaching council members or staff, employees who are staffing the meeting. If a person does disrupt the meeting, I will give a warning and the person's remaining comment time, or ask the person to leave the meeting room for the rest of the meeting. My hope and personal request is that we all be respectful of each other and we can express ourselves without being demeaning or rude. And I know we can do that, so we'll get started. Thank you. City Clerk, can we have the roll call, please? Here.
Deputy Mayor Malakuti. Councilmember Hamilton. Councilmember Lee.
Here.
Councilmember Neuenhouse.
Here.
Councilmember Stokes.
Here.
And Councilmember Zahn.
Here. Councilmember Zahn, can you lead us in the flag salute, please?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So we have two proclamations tonight. We have, the first one is the Transgender Awareness Week and Day of Remembrance proclamation that will be read by Councilmember Stokes and accepted by Morgan Witten, board member and IT director for Pride Across the Bridge. Morgan, you want to come and sit with us as we read this? And then we'll read another one after, and then we'll come back and do pictures, okay? Go ahead, Councilmember Stokes.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Whereas more than 1 million adults in the U.S. identify as transgender or non-binary, totaling an estimated 1.6% of the adult population, according to a recent Pew Research Center survey, and whereas transgender, non-binary, and gender-conforming people contribute to Bellevue's culture and community in many ways and are an important component of the city's rich diversity. The invaluable contributions and enduring activism found within the community has helped advance equity and inclusion for all groups and should never be forgotten. And whereas there continues to be a need for action towards acceptance and equality for transgender, non-binary, and gender non-conforming communities. Each year, people and organizations around the country participate in Transgender Awareness Week, which is November the 13th through the 19th, to help raise visibility and awareness for transgender communities and address the issues they still face, including prejudice, discrimination, and violence, and whereas first officially recognized in 1999 after the murder of Rita Hester, a transgender black woman, Transgender Day of Remembrance on November the 20th is an annual vigil that takes place around the world to honor and remember all transgender and gender nonconforming community members lost to violence in the current year. And whereas the city of Bellevue joins transgender people and their allies to educate the public about who transgender people are and the urgent need for resources to support and protect this community. City staff gather each year to recognize Transgender Day of Remembrance and read the names of transgender community members lost to our nation in violence. Now, therefore, I, John Stokes, on behalf of Lynn Robinson, Mayor of Bellevue, Washington, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim November the 13th and 19th Transgender Awareness Week and Day of Remembrance in Bellevue. And we encourage all residents to join ceremonies and activities to raise awareness for transgender issues while reflecting on the unique identities and lives within this community.
Thank you, Councilmember Stokes.
Thank you.
Morgan, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Good. Thank you for recognizing Transgender Awareness Week and Trans Day of Remembrance with this proclamation. These moments are vital for raising awareness and honoring the lives of those we've lost due to violence, hatred, and fear. It is both an honor and a somber duty to receive this on their behalf. So why does it matter? Hatred and violence towards transgender people has risen to alarming levels. This year alone, over 650 anti-trans bills were proposed across the United States. And more than 350 transgender people were murdered worldwide. Many more remain unreported or lost due to suicide, which disproportionately affects trans and non-binary youth. In fact, anti-trans legislation increased the risk of suicide attempts among these youth by as much as 72%. Even here in Washington, while we enjoy some of the strongest protections in the nation, we are not immune. 6 anti-trans bills were introduced this year alone. It's terrifying to face a reality where some leaders seek to dehumanize and erase us entirely, yet we continue to find strength in our families, support networks, and communities. So what can you do? Well, if you know a trans person, reach out. Tell them that they matter, that they are loved, and ask how they are doing or if you can support them. If you don't know anyone, or if you're trans and feel isolated, get connected. Join local organizations like PFLAG or Pride Across the Bridge, where you'll find support, inclusive events, and community that welcomes and needs you. So our community is full of incredible people who simply want to be seen, heard, and respected. Thank you. City Council, thank you so much for standing with us, proclaiming that trans lives matters here in Bellevue. It is a proclamation like this that gives us hope for a more inclusive and safe future. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Go ahead and sit down, and then we'll come back and do a picture. Next, we have Councilmember Hamilton reading the World Day of Remembrance for Road Traffic Victims proclamation, and that will be accepted by our own fire chaplain, Mike Ryan, police and fire chaplain, and May Wong, Bellevue resident, and BIX Men Pedestrian Safety Foundation.
Whereas in 2023, 40,990 people died in traffic crashes in the United States, with 733 of them occurring in Washington state, according to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. And whereas 23 people died and 217 people were seriously injured in traffic crashes on Bellevue's roads from 2014 to 2023, 3 people were killed in traffic crashes in Bellevue this last October. And whereas each crash affects parents, children, siblings, grandchildren, colleagues, classmates, and friends whose lives were lost or transformed in an instant, and whereas the City of Bellevue has adopted Vision Zero, which aims to eliminate traffic deaths and serious injury collisions on city streets by 2030, and whereas the safe system approach used in Vision Zero identifies pillars, supportive elements, and strategies to work towards the ultimate goal, and includes engaging and educating people to take personal responsibility in advancing Vision Zero. And whereas the World Day of Remembrance for Road Traffic Victims is a high-profile global event to remember the many millions who have been killed and seriously injured on the world's roads, and to acknowledge the suffering of all affected victims, families, and communities. And whereas the 2024 World Day of Remembrance theme, Traffic Deaths and Serious Injuries Are Preventable, reminds us that we have tools to prevent these tragedies and can save lives by investing in Vision Zero and the safe system approach. Now, therefore, I, Dave Hamilton, on behalf of Lynn Robinson, Mayor of Bellevue, Washington, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim November 17th, 2024 as World Day of Remembrance for Road Traffic Victims in Bellevue, and urge all community members to remember those impacted by traffic crashes and to consider what we can do to improve road safety together.
Great, welcome.
My name is Beijing Man, and I'm May's husband. Thank you, Mayor Robinson, and thank you, Council Member David Hamilton, and thanks to all the other council members too. We lost our son last year. Through a traffic accident. We don't want that to happen to anyone in Bellevue again, so we form a foundation, and my son's name, Big Man Foundation. we deliver some reflex sash or the armband to the communities to prevent the tragedies. May's heavily involved in the foundation. I'm gonna let her to introduce the foundation
Thank you.
for the mayors and the council members.
I hope one day we don't need this memorial, like for the victim. There's no victim anymore. So, when you say traffic death is an accident, we know it can be avoided if we follow the rule. It can be avoided. So we shouldn't call it accident. It's a violence when we drive on a road and we did not follow the traffic rules. So I know now the room you can see a lot of people wear in dark. We walk in dark. So if everyone can wear like a reflective sash or armband when you walk out on the dark, you can make the car see you far, far away. And if you can install the app, there's a driver, like safe driver app provided by lots of insurance companies to prevent the, to help people to drive better. I think that is a very, very good thing to do, and we should promote that. To make every driver, even they get a driver license, doesn't mean they can drive correctly. We should have a good driving behavior. That's what I would like to do for the future. And yeah, I don't really want anything like my son happen again. Mm-hmm. It shouldn't happen. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council, to make everything good in our community, and hope this is things we can all do together.
Thank you.
So our foundation have some fund. We this year we host a golf tournament to recruit some fund to help the community to become safer. So if any community they need a reflex sash, we can donate to for them from our foundation.
How would somebody access your foundation if they wanted to get a sash or to ask for one?
Yeah.
Do you have a website?
Yes, we do.
We do, yeah.
Can you say what it is slowly?
The name's Bixman Foundation.
Yeah, the foundation.
Pedestrian Safety Foundation. Yeah. Bixman Pedestrian Safety Foundation.
Okay, great.
Yeah, the website is bixmanpsf.org.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you for that. Chaplain, did you want to speak as well?
Yeah, it's my sad charge to respond to fatalities that we have in the city when people die outside of the hospital. Our firefighters and medics and our officers come to the scene, and they look for people, or they look to me to come alongside those family members and support them as I can. I had 2 of those kinds of calls today. But on October 7th, I was called by one of our traffic supervisors to come to Crossroads because there was a fatal accident involving Sergeant Brian Tomaszewski, who was a recruiter for the military there. He was an Afghan vet, and he decided to take a lunch break and got on his motorcycle and headed west on Northeast 24th Street, and unfortunately hit an intersection the same time another car did, and he was killed instantly. And I was being asked to come in to notify his wife and daughter that he had died. In my work, it's sad to do the work that I do. I always say that God's given me the resilience to handle these kinds of calls, but death notifications are the hardest because you catch people cold turkey and there's no way to make it better. And as I teach our guys when we talk about death notifications, you can't make it better, but you can be kind. And I can tell you that our officers were extremely kind in giving care and support to Amber, who was Brian's wife. We were able to spend some time with her and her 5-year-old daughter, and I can say that his buddies in the military have stepped up to help and support him, and there's still some ongoing care going on with that. But that was a very tough call. But then on October 20th, I got called by our medical supervisor to come to an apartment complex just off of 140th. A mom and her 4-year-old daughter were walking back in their parking lot to go to check on their laundry when, and as you could imagine, you know how 4-year-olds kind of drift around and wander around. That's what was going on, and a guy in an F-150 pickup truck with oversized tires was backing into a parking place and did not see this little girl and ran over her and killed her instantly. And as you can imagine, Mom was as inconsolable as anybody I've ever seen. Myself and 2 officers stayed with her for 3.5 hours as the death was being investigated, waiting for the medical examiner to come. And eventually we thought it was best for Mom, as upset as she was, that we have an aid car come and take her to the hospital here where she could get some support. She had a nephew that lived in Tacoma that eventually did show up, and unfortunately she didn't speak any English. In fact, she spoke a dialect of a tribal community from her native Guatemala, and we had a hard time just trying to communicate, and so that was a very long and difficult call, just all because of inattentiveness in a short moment. So, what we talk about here, 0 deaths, is really a good goal, and something I hope we could achieve.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your stories. And Mr. and Mrs. Wang, thank you so much for your courage in coming down tonight and sharing your story so that we can all do better. And I really appreciate your foundation making it safer for everybody, and we'll be sharing that information. Can we do a picture together? Thank you. Okay, do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
Is there a second? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, oral communications. City Clerk, do we have anyone signed up for that tonight?
Thank you, Mayor. There are 8 pre-registered speakers on tonight's list. So before I start calling names, I'll go over a few of the rules that the council has in place. So the total time for oral communications is for a period not to exceed 30 minutes, and all topics must relate to City of Bellevue government. People speaking to items on tonight's agenda will be called first, and then if time remains, people speaking to items not on tonight's agenda will be called. In each of those categories, the presiding officer is authorized to give preference to those who have not spoken to council within the last 60 days, or who will be speaking on topics that will come in front of the council within the next 60 days. Each speaker is allowed up to 3 minutes to speak, and only 3 speakers are allowed to speak to any one side of a particular topic. So with that, I will call our first speaker, who is Court Olson.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, council members. I'm speaking tonight as a consultant to new commercial and multifamily building owners. I have 4 decades of experience in design and construction oversight as well as cost estimating. That's why I'm sharing my perspective on the proposed EV charging building code amendment tonight. I'm also speaking on behalf of the People for Climate Action Bellevue chapter. As you may know, the Washington State Building Council updates statewide minimum building code standards every 3 years. A city must adopt the minimum code, but cities have an option to strengthen it with amendments as well. You probably also know that 10 years from now, in 2035, state law prevents sales of new gas cars. So the whole state is transitioning towards EVs. Because reducing the use of gas-powered vehicles is critical to lowering greenhouse gas emissions citywide, it's very smart for our local government to be encouraging the switch to EVs as well as to alternative transportation modes. We therefore commend Bellevue for drafting an EV transition roadmap, which includes a building code amendment that would enhance EV charging capacities for new buildings. Enhancing EV charging capacities in new multifamily buildings is especially important since most of our future population growth will be housed in them, and it's also important for people to charge an EV at home overnight since that won't overload the electrical grid. As I travel around Bellevue, it appears that more than 10% of the cars on the roads are already EVs. It therefore makes sense to require at least 15% of parking stalls in new multifamily buildings to have EV chargers. Given the fast approaching new car sales requirements, 25 years from now, in 2050, it's highly likely that at least 75% of the cars on Bellevue roads will be EVs, especially since the city's projecting 100%. This is why we highly recommend that EV charging code amendment, total charging capacity requirements be elevated to a total of 75% for new building, multifamily buildings. The easiest column to grow such capacity in the proposed EV charging capacities shown in code amendment charts is in the 3rd column, which is entitled EV capable. That category is a minuscule cost consequences for a multifamily building builder. Thanks for listening tonight. We appreciate you thinking heavily and strongly on this EV code amendment process.
Mr. Olson, I couldn't hear you what you said. You were recommending 70% of what?
75% total
75%.
capacity for all 3 categories in that amendment chart.
Okay, thank you.
It's currently proposed in tonight's materials to use 60%.
Mr. Olson, sorry, your time has
Well,
expired.
I asked him a question, so,
Thank you.
all right, thank you.
The next speaker is April Stevens.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, council members, and city staff. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight, and thank you for all of the service you do for our city. My name is April Stevens. I'm a resident of Bellevue, and I'm speaking tonight as a volunteer on behalf of People for Climate Action, as well as for all the children who will be living and working in Bellevue one day as adults. Each of you publicly and privately have expressed support for actions to combat climate change by reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And yet, the support has not become a priority in the city of Bellevue, as evidenced by the recent budget adoption. We understand there are many competing needs in any city, and that revenues are limited. Here now is an opportunity for you to demonstrate your support for climate action that will not cost money for the city. This opportunity exists in the building code you determine for future multifamily buildings in regard to their electric vehicle readiness and capabilities. We're asking to raise the required percentage of multifamily residences that are EV capable from 25% to 40%. While developers might complain that you're passing the cost along to them, this cost is minimal in any new construction. EV capable means simply providing the necessary wire channels and electrical service panel size to accommodate all eventual wiring to future EV charging parking locations. I live in a multifamily condominium, and last year, our homeowners association assessed each homeowner approximately $5,000 to retrofit our parking spaces to EV capable. While we are fortunate to be in a position to be able to pay this assessment, most multifamily units are occupied by people with moderate incomes, and the cost of retrofitting can be prohibitive. Conversely, it is relatively inexpensive for the infrastructure to be installed during construction. The infrastructure is an enabler for families in multifamily homes to be able to transition to an electric vehicle, saving them even more money at the gas pump and making life in Bellevue more affordable. I would hope that you would ask developers to outline their costs for this basic infrastructure should they indicate that my premise regarding their costs be incorrect. In closure, we therefore recommend that the total multifamily capability be raised from 60 to 75% by raising EV-capable column to 40%. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Deepa Sivarajan, who's joining us virtually. Ms. Sivarajan, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Oh, we can. Your time begins now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I will keep it short. Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Deepa Sivarajan. I'm a climate policy manager at Climate Solutions, a nonprofit working in the Northwest to accelerate clean energy solutions to the climate crisis. I'm also here to speak in support of Agenda Item 10 on Bellevue's EV roadmap and EV readiness proposal. As I said, I'll keep it short. I think that Court and other folks from PCA have said what needs to be said about the importance of EV charging at home and for multifamily building residents. So I support the proposals put forward by PCA and thank Council for considering this tonight.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Patsy Naher, who doesn't look as joining us. Ms. Naher, if you are online, can you please raise your hand to indicate your presence? Can you do that one more time for me, please? Okay. I'm going to skip to the next speaker and circle back. The next speaker on our list is Naima Hudson.
I'm yielding my time to my mother, Maria Hudson.
Hi, I'm here because I'm horrified. My child was sex trafficked out of LifeWire domestic violence shelter, after being sex trafficked out of Bellevue School District, Odo Middle School, after being sex trafficked out of Bellevue City proper since age 12. It violated the Violence Against Women's Act, reauthorized at 2022, Subpart 3, child sex trafficking victims. They came into our apartment while I was asleep on camera and took my daughter from the parking lot and stole my vehicle. The director and several domestic violence workers lied to the police when they looked at the video. They did not tell me that my daughter's sex traffickers were on that video when they reported on September 6th. They lied to the parent, they lied to the police. I should have had an Amber Alert and a stolen vehicle report. My daughter has level 1 and level 2 autism. So to be clear, they violated the mandated reporter's duties because they come under RCW 2644080, the same as the police. And by the way, I will be submitting evidence that the city of Bellevue funds them, and Bellevue Police Department was the name security and patrol. Since last year, this time, Detective Alexander Slusser did a child forensic interview with me and my daughter and her attorney, Alex Navarez, where he apologized to me for my daughter going to Bellevue School District, okay, and being taken advantage of by Brianna, Chloe, and these other adult male sex traffickers, Xavier and Gerard. Let me explain to you the rage I feel as an African-American mother when the history of this country is sex trafficking of Black kids and Black parents being precluded from protecting them. So I want to be absolutely clear. From the anti-literacy slavery laws to Jim Crow to school to prison, it's a sex trafficking pipeline. Shannon McMenemy, Bellevue School District's attorney, is aware of it. They are actually blackmailing me, withholding special educational pipeline services for my daughter by misdiagnoses and Medicaid fraud. And Bellevue Police Department is allowing them to do this. She's trying to coerce me criminally to sign a special educational document based off of eugenics and her committing attorney-client directed crimes. She literally lied in that document and said I was isolating my daughter from sex trafficking students, sex buyers, and adult male pimps. It is not okay for the city of Bellevue to have 2.9% African-American population and a
Ms.
tax
Hudson?
base.
Ms. Hudson, I apologize, your time is up.
I'm sorry, did 6 minutes pass? Because my daughter yielded me her 3 minutes.
The council rules do not allow for a deferral of time. It's only 3
You
minutes per
may
individual.
submit an email with the rest of your comments, or the whole thing would be helpful.
Okay.
Yeah.
You need to address your police department because they're failing to protect my daughter.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Patsy Naher, who I'm going to ask again if you could raise your hand online to indicate your presence.
Who takes these right now?
I'll take it.
There are 15, and I expect them to be published.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to skip to the next speaker again, which is Joe Kunzler, who is joining us online. Mr. Kunzler, can you hear me?
Here, just fine.
Thank you.
Or-
Your time begins now.
Yeah, this is Joe Kunzler here. I want to thank you for your time this evening and your continued public service. I want you aware that considering your problems with a certain troubled individual and Alex Zimmerman, who has a suspended driver's license, that there's also a AWC priority, Association of Working Cities priority, to fix the Public Meetings Act for disruptive behavior, and I ask for the City Council's support of it. I think it's important that we have a Public Meetings Act that doesn't allow for hate. I attempted to ask for this several years ago, and the Attorney General's office at the time was resistant. I'm grateful the Association of Washington Cities is taking this on. Obviously, I'm not a member. Obviously, I'm not a client, but I learned of it through their very voluminous webpage, and I'm asking for your support, please, of this priority. While I have a bit of time on a couple of other things, first, as you may have heard, Representative Mia Gregerson wants to legalize homelessness encampments all over, on transit, on sidewalks and such, and I hope that you will oppose that legislation. My buddy Ari Hoffman and I talked about it today on KVI. The other thing you might want to be aware of is that Mr. Alex Zimmerman is driving with a suspended license, and considering your concern for traffic violence, you might want to make sure he doesn't drive from this meeting racing up the highway to Redmond to terrorize my pals up there, and then going to his lover girls in Kirkland. Just might want to be something you want to flag for your concern. Thank you for your public service.
Thank you. Our final speaker on our pre-registered list is Alex Zimmerman.
The Heil, my dirty damn Nazi Gestapo anti-Semite pig, you know what this mean? Cockroaches from Puerto Rico garbage. I'm back, but right now I'm not alone. I together with my President Trump and 100 million American who thinking need clean this dirty chamber like you. Democrat who destroy us totally for last 4 years in us state, totally controlling Democrat Nazi pig. It's exactly what's happened. So I want to explain to you my experience for 4 years, what is I live in Bellevue. I give you a little bit opinion, you know what it means, what's going on. 5 times you prosecute me, right now 2 cases in court, all open with perjury under oath, all of it, 5, and 2 exactly same. You right now, you know what it means? Who did this? City attorney. Can city attorney doing crime? Yeah, because I have different opinion. Maybe because I am a Jew. For example, you, Consul Robertson, you know what it means? Make a Muhammad. Muhammad, your name Muhammad? Yeah, Muhammad, yeah. Yeah, make a deputy mayor with support everybody, man who first time elected and live only in America for 10 years. How is this possible? Who are you? And I talked this many times before, and I will repeat again and again and again, before we not cleanse this dirty chamber from you, because by definition, you all criminal, you know what this means? Ordinary bandita. And for me, for many years, because first case, what is you take against me is this in 30 years ago, when I have bring housing class action on behalf of 500 family. I remember policemen who did this to me 30 years ago. When 200 people signed signature list, you know what this means? They come and talk, stopping this or we will arrest you. So for 30 years, nothing changed in Bellevue. You by definition are Nazi pig. You know what this means? And your policemen are most criminal. And I can approve this in court. Approve this before 3 times. Will be approved right now twice in court too. So I ask you to right now a very simple point. Stand up, America. Stand up. Viva Trump. Viva USA. Viva 100 million Americans who understand we need bring country back to normal. What is we lose for last 30, 40 years. This is exactly what is we need. Stand up, America. I give you paper. So you stay.
Okay, that is the, Mr. Zimmerman. That is the end of our pre-registered list. So at this point, I'd ask if there's anyone else joining us this evening who would like to speak, please raise your hand.
Thank you, April. Averill, could you please let the next person speak? Thank you. Hi.
Thank you for this opportunity, Mayor and Deputy Mayor, and I respect you all for all the things that you have done, especially to listen to these comments that are not appropriate, but they are a part of free speech, and I thank you for tolerating that. I wanted to share a couple of things with you. By the way, I'm Lee Sargent. I live at 16246 Northeast 24th Street. We heard today about some 40,000 people dying in the roads last year, and it really sounds like a terrible number. When I was growing up in Port Angeles, my mom brought home a book that showed me the deaths that were every year presented to her at work to make people aware. In those times, and there was about 170 million people in the world, in the United States, it was 50,000 people that died in a year, and 4 times that number were crippled. So while we're concerned about, and we have to be concerned about, the deaths on the road and the deaths that have happened, we need to recognize we have 330 million people and 40,000. So we have made progress, and we are making progress. So this is not all a negative, but it's not to be stopped. I thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else joining us who would like to make a comment? Okay, no additional hands online, Mayor. I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, thank you. Well, we have some good news from our city manager.
Thank you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and council members. We do have a good news item tonight, and we have a few special guests joining us as well. So recently, the city received, was recognized under the Governor's Smart Community Awards, which highlighted local governments and their partners for exceptional land use, planning, and development. And I will invite our guests to the table here. They'll share a little bit more information about the awards that Bellevue received. We have John Snyder, Senior Policy Advisor to Governor Inslee. Christopher Lovings is also in the audience, Community Engagement Specialist with the Department of Commerce. And then we have our Community Development Director, Emil King, and our Parks Director, Michael Shiosaki. And with that, I'll hand it over to Emil.
Thank you for the introduction, City Manager, and good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and members of Council. Tonight's an exciting night. We're here to recognize 2 awards. And first, I want to thank the Governor's Office for recognizing the City of Bellevue and other partner organizations with 2 2024 Governor's Smart Communities Awards. And these are being received for Bellevue's Housing Stability Program, and then a separate award for the East Rail Wolverton Framework Plan, which we are a joint recipient with King County. So it's an honor to be recognized for this work that we have collectively done to serve the Bellevue community. Michael and I represent many staff who've been involved in these projects. Some of them are in the audience tonight, and many more are at home tonight. In addition, we've had significant work done by the Bellevue City Council, Bellevue boards and commissions, and our Bellevue community members to get us to the point where these are award worthy. As we hear about the awards, 2 common points I wanted to point out are these are just examples of successful efforts serving our community with transformative programs and projects and the positive impact that they can bring to the city of Bellevue. And then the second point is the power of partnerships. So partnerships allow us to maximize what we can do at the city of Bellevue with other organizations who have shared goals. So with that, I want to hand it off to Michael to introduce John.
Thank you, Emil. Good evening, everyone. It is my pleasure this evening to introduce my friend and fellow Spokenite, John Snyder. John, as you heard, serves as Senior Policy Advisor to Governor Jay Inslee on outdoor recreation, economic development, and land use. John coordinates policy, legislation, budget items, and outreach for the governor related to those issue areas. He was appointed in December of 2015 to that role. And after serving on the Spokane City Council for 6 years and owning a regional outdoor magazine for 9 years, John served on the Washington Transportation Safety Commission, the Spokane Transit Authority, and the Spokane Regional Health District, as well as a leadership role in passing local ballot measures to fund infrastructure, including parks, streets, libraries, and public transportation. John authored one of the state's first comprehensive complete streets ordinances. His portfolio of agencies include Washington State Parks, the Department of Natural Resources, the Department of Fish and Wildlife, Department of Archaeology and Historic Preservation, and the Department of Commerce. So thank you so much for being here this evening, and I'll turn it to you, John.
Thank you for that introduction. It's great to be here tonight. I'm pleased to be here on behalf of Governor Jay Inslee, whose priorities on planning and the environment and climate are well known. And I'm delighted to celebrate the local achievements in planning under the Growth Management Act that we recognize with the Governor's Smart Communities Awards. These awards have been handed out since 2006 by the Department of Commerce. And this evening, and this year, in fact, we've had dozens and dozens of applications from communities around the state for these honors, but only a very few rise to the top. So it is just, I am just very delighted to see that the city of Bellevue is involved with not just one, but two of these awards. The first award is the Smart Housing Award. Bellevue's work on the House Stability Program is inspired. It's not just a single project or even many projects. It's a dedicated funding program and a plan designed to continue investments into all phases of affordable housing for your community for the foreseeable future. This year's judges liked that it used multiple funding sources in a comprehensive way. Your inclusion of non-housing related partners, such as the Parks Department, made it feel more collaborative and effective. With this new funding system in place, we know we'll be seeing projects from this program for years to come. So Mayor Robinson, members of the council, congratulations on the reception of this award.
Thank you.
Michael and I wanted to add on a few words about this particular award. We'll be brief. This is a very special recognition for the city of Bellevue. The city recognizes that it's critically important to provide a safe, healthy, and affordable place for all people to live in the city. In 2020, we adopted the 0.1% local sales tax provided under HB 1590 to create our program and help those most in need in the city. So far, the Housing Stability Program has invested close to $30 million, both in development of new units, preservation of existing units, and supportive units in the city. So while we are still in the early years of this program, it is an ongoing program, and there's many more successes that we're looking forward to in the future.
And the Housing Stability Program prioritizes ongoing funding for services for those residents to ensure they have the support systems they need. In addition, the program invests in behavioral health and housing-related services that increase well-being and housing stability for residents across the city. In Bellevue, as we know, we recognize that diversity is our strength. By investing in deeply affordable housing and vital support programs, we're helping all our residents become an integrated part of Bellevue, thereby increasing the diversity and strength of the entire community. Thank you.
So the second award is the Judges Merit Award. This award is an award that basically judges decide, hey, we didn't have enough awards in enough categories, and we're going to make one up, basically, because we think this effort is so well done. The winners of the Judges Merit Awards demonstrate good planning and deserved recognition for so many things. The East Trail Wilburton Framework Plan shows us a strong partnership between the city of Bellevue and King County, with efforts to expand on that partnership for 42 miles of trail. The plan showcases a housing and transit design framework that makes your community more accessible and provides a new model and novel way to include trails in transportation design. Judges loved the use of that trail system within the larger transportation network and the trail-focused approach to development. Connecting it to light rail and making the design work as a part of your future transit-oriented development corridor has set this project apart from others, earning it the judge's merit. Now, in conjunction with the city of Bellevue, this award has partners in King County, and I want to recognize King County Parks Director Warren Jimenez, who's here tonight to help receive the reward. Also, we have representatives from the Burger Partnership, who are another recipient of the award, and 3SI as well, but they couldn't make it here tonight. I just want to say, once again, your staff has done incredible work, but they could not do that work without the support of council. You build the framework, you provide the vision, you provide the leadership, and you create the scaffolding that they can climb up to create these achievements. So my hat is off to you all, and congratulations on your awards tonight.
And I'll just add on a quick statement on this one, Mayor. It's a great honor to receive this award for the East Trail Wilburton Framework Plan, and it was a pleasure working with these partner organizations and consultants to actually develop it. The Wilburton segment of East Trail does provide this unique opportunity for the city, King County, and private property owners to activate the trail with trail-oriented development and really be the heart of this emerging redevelopment area in Wilburton. It's going to provide sustainable mobility options for people to walk, bike, and move around in a sustainable manner. And East Trail will be a front door to many new developments over there as it redevelops. So in closing, East Trail is a great project, and it syncs up nicely also with the eastern connecting point to the Grand Connection that we're working on now to take folks from the East Trail through Wilburton into downtown and on to Maiden-Bower Bay. So we look forward to continuing this great partnership with King County, the East Trail partners, and the community to really make the East Trail segment what it can be in the Wilburton area. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Did you have something to say, Michael?
I have nothing to add.
Okay, well, this is wonderful. It's really exciting. I'll tell you that one of the most courageous steps this council did was to adopt the 1590 and take the 1.1% sales tax. So thank you for recognizing that, in addition to all the collaborative work that's been done here. Can we do some pictures? I feel like we might be photobombing your picture, but we'd like to. Is that okay?
Yes,
Can we
please.
get everybody who's been a part of it? Okay, is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we have one study session item. It was unclear to me whether this was for direction, feedback, or information only. So I think we're going to kind of play it by ear, but I do believe that there are many community partners out there that would like to weigh in who have not had a chance to do that yet. So it is okay to do this as information only and come back later, but I'll have you introduce it.
Thank you,
City
Mayor, and
Manager.
I was going to touch on that. So, yes, the study session we have is on our EV roadmap, and that is work that's associated with our environmental stewardship plan. Staff is going to review that roadmap, but also go over some options for addressing the electric vehicle readiness in multifamily buildings. I'd like to acknowledge that there was a lot of information provided associated with this, and that council may have questions that need to be answered to help inform the policy direction. This was set up as a study session to present the information and to ensure that council has this time to ask questions about the options. And I will reiterate as well that direction's not required this evening, nor necessarily being sought, especially if you have open questions from that need responding to, or that further directions with stakeholders might be beneficial. So with that introduction, I will hand it over to our Community Development Department and Director Emil King, Jennifer Ewing, our Environmental Stewardship Program Manager, Colin Munson, who's our Climate and E-Mobility Coordinator, and then we also have Greg Schrader, our building official here from Development Services. And with that, I will hand it to Emil.
Thank you for the introduction, City Manager, and good evening again, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and members of council. So I'm going to offer up a few introductory remarks on this first slide, and then we'll move into the presentation. So just as a baseline, the transition to electric vehicles in Bellevue is a key part of Bellevue's environmental planning and our local greenhouse gas reduction targets, as you've heard during the oral communications and in our past meetings. As part of the implementation of the city's current environmental stewardship plan, we do have actions relating to EV readiness. So EV readiness is thinking about how you prepare buildings and the public realm to actually charge up electric vehicles.
Emil, I feel like if we wired up that little art installation out there, we could power the whole city right now. That's a little scary. Okay, go ahead.
We'll keep our focus, yeah. Let's see. The discussion of EV readiness tonight is in the context of the charging infrastructure for electric vehicles in new development. So that's what we're focusing on discussion tonight. And our meeting tonight is going to cover the key facets of the recently completed EV roadmap, which is attached to your council memo. And the EV roadmap is something that looks ahead and identifies paths that the city can take to meet our goals. So tonight we'll be covering options for EV readiness in light of the recent state minimum requirements for new development. And then acknowledging some of the material tonight is new to the council, so we're going to take the time to go through it in detail and have our notebooks out to answer any questions you have and take notes for any follow-up that we need to do on this subject. So the memo was written up to lay out some options for council. It is not an urgency that we get a direction on these options tonight, especially the ones that relate to things like potential new code requirements. So treat tonight as an introduction to this subject to the city council. Our presentation and the packet does lay out 3 levels of EV readiness for parking stalls, and Colin will be going into that in significantly more detail. But as the primer, just to understand the options, there are 3 different levels. EV capable stalls are stalls in a building that have the power supply to the building or the electrical panel, and then a conduit out to the parking stall. So it's capable of having a charger in the future. EV ready spot takes it a step further where you actually have the wiring to the stall, you have a plug, and if someone wants to take a portable charger out there, they can actually use it to charge their car. It's not as fast as a full charger, but is capable of charging your car. And then the highest level that we'll be talking about is where you actually have an EV charger at the stall. So that's what you see in some apartment buildings, at some shopping malls and other facilities are the EV chargers. So in the options that we'll be talking about, one option is to go above the state code in the EV ready category. Option 2 is to go above the state code in the EV capable category. And then option 3 is to stick with the newly adopted state code that we have for Bellevue and revisit it in the fall of 2026. And then option 4 is if you want to have a different direction for us tonight that varies from these 3 first options. So the agenda for tonight is we'll first spend some time reviewing the key findings from the EV roadmap. So again, this is a technical document that we spent quite a bit of time on this year, laying out the path to reach our goals in a number of the EV areas. Staff will then review the EV readiness framework, and this is going to look at EV market growth in Bellevue and the high current and projected future numbers of electric vehicle ownership in our city. Then we'll go into the current EV state requirements for new development and then focus in on some different readiness levels for parking stalls that we're considering as different options. When we review the options, we will go into some cost details, and we'll also be going into some pros and cons of each of the options that we have for you tonight. And then finally, we'll be answering questions that you have, taking notes for any follow-up, and if there is direction you would like to give tonight, we're open to that, but also open to just having this as an information session. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to staff.
I'll give a kind of quick overview of the EV roadmap. So this is the planning document we put together to really help us understand as a city kind of what are some of the needs in the community for EV charging infrastructure. And we really use this planning process to kind of help answer a few questions. You know, what's the city's role in supporting vehicle electrification? Where do we need charging and what kind of charging? And also, you know, what are some opportunities to leverage different external funding, partnerships, that sort of thing, so we can also help channel private investment into Bellevue for EV charging infrastructure. So we put the plan together to really help the staff and the community understand what the forecast looks like in terms of adoption of electric vehicles, which was, you know, faster than we were actually expecting, which Colin will speak more to. I think we've already seen pretty rapid adoption in Bellevue. We have about 3 times the percent of EVs on the road here compared to the rest of the state. So we're seeing the transition happen quickly, and we're really kind of just at sort of a bit of a tipping point in terms of that transition. As I believe Emil mentioned, transportation is about 45% of our greenhouse gas emissions. So in order to achieve our climate goals, vehicle electrification is a really key strategy, and having the right charging infrastructure in place is really essential to that. The plan talks about kind of a number of different actions we can take related to, you know, policy, incentives, infrastructure investments, and in particular partnerships. So I won't go into those in too much detail, but you know, the plan really speaks to the action in the ESI plan about, you know, supporting vehicle electrification, and then this work also kind of speaks to the action in the ESI plan around looking at EV readiness in our buildings. I will just quickly kind of highlight some of the engagement we did for the EV roadmap. We did a lot of engagement with our community, residents, people in single-family homes, multifamily homes, developers, and property managers. Talked to also people who currently drive EVs or maybe interested in an EV or just kind of wanted to learn more. Hadn't really thought about it. I think what we heard a lot of is that we saw it both in our engagement, but also have seen in our research that people just want to charge their vehicles at home. That's kind of the easiest and most cost-effective way of doing it. And in speaking to people in multifamily buildings, some of them had the opportunity to already charge at their building. A lot of those parking spaces are in high demand. But for folks who live in a multifamily building where there isn't charging infrastructure, that's definitely a big barrier for them, buying or leasing an EV. And then the other thing we heard, or another big theme that came through, especially from property managers, is just the cost to install this infrastructure, on an existing building is really high, and it's a big complex project that's challenging to do. So Colin will speak a little more to some of the engagement we did around EV readiness in particular, but those were kind of just some of the key themes. And then I think one other theme that I think we heard from a lot of residents is just there's a lot of excitement around this. It's it's an exciting technology. People are seeing EVs. I think they're, compared to other parts of the country, there's much higher understanding of the benefits of EVs and that sort of thing in Bellevue. So I think our community in general is really poised for this transition. I think that definitely came through in the engagement. So with that, I'll hand it over to Colin to talk more about EV readiness in particular. Thanks.
Thank you. So a little bit of background here before we get into all the details. 4 major points of sort of why we're looking at this. And as Emil mentioned, this is one of the actions from both the ESI plan as well as the recently completed EV roadmap. Starting with just the number of EVs. We have a little more detail on this on the next slide, but through the roadmap process, what we understand is that there's just a lot of EVs in Bellevue, and there'll be many, many more soon. As Jennifer mentioned, getting charging into existing multifamily buildings, what we're hearing from the community is that's already becoming a problem today, right? And with potential code update, that's something we can do to address that problem into to the future, to keep us on pace both for our EV goals as well as our just general ESI goals. Just thinking about this action as a climate policy, right? This is one of the things that we can do fully under our control as a city to take action to address our ESI goals. This isn't a state, this isn't a federal thing, this is an us thing. And then lastly, what we see in what I'll say is for now, the preliminary budget is that we're recognizing the importance of EV charging, EV infrastructure holistically as a city, and then also particularly through the council contingency. Diving a little bit deeper, into that comment about just the number of EVs on the road in Bellevue and that growth. This is all data that's coming from that EV roadmap process, which is, again, really informed by the community. What we said on the last slide is that a lot of EVs in Bellevue today, many more in the future, and there's sort of 2 sides of that coin, the policy side and the market side. On the policy side, what we have, what I believe Emil referenced, is in Washington State, what we have as a regulation is that in 2035 and beyond, every new vehicle sold in the state will be electric. That regulation kicks in 2026 and then gradually works its way up until 2035. On the market side, just very simply, where we are today is much more on par with like places in California, particularly the Bay Area, which we just really associate with EVs, with the new technology. Washington as a state is about 2nd or 3rd highest in terms of number of EVs by state. We have 3 times the rate in Bellevue of EVs on the road today than Washington State. When we take those 2 sides of the coin, the policy market, together, what we get is one of our core projections from the EV roadmap, which is that in 2035, we're expecting that 60% of the vehicles on the road in Bellevue are electric. Hold on to that 60%. We're going to come back to that in a few minutes. The next part of the rationale here was about building infrastructure to keep us on pace for our goals and to keep pace with that growth. As Jennifer mentioned, what we heard from the community over and over again in our work on the EV roadmap was just that people want to charge at home. Nationally, about 80% of all EV charging today happens at home, again, due to cost and convenience. And in our survey of EV drivers in Bellevue, 85% of them said that they would want to charge at home over any other location in the city. As we mentioned, the big barrier towards this is in multifamily buildings, existing multifamily buildings, where getting charging in is very expensive. It's very complicated. We estimate about 3 to 4 times more expensive after construction versus upfront, and that's largely due to when buildings don't have the electrical capacity or the power supply at construction. Now, to be clear, we're talking about a code update. We're talking about stricter standards. This would increase development costs. As Emil mentioned, we do have more particular data on this later, but when we're talking about our options 1 and 2, which we'll get to, what we're talking about is that over what's in the state code, for a typical building in Bellevue, a 0.06 or 0.07% increase over what's in the state standard for EV readiness, as or 0.06 of the total cost of development of this typical building. Again, more on that in a little bit. This is the thing that Emil touched on at the very top, sort of getting to the nuts and bolts of EV readiness here. The 3 categories, I'm going to move here from right to left, and we'll see why in a moment. Starting with our lowest level of EV readiness, EV capable. This is a parking space that has the electrical capacity and the raceway or the conduit, the space for the wires, so that parking space can much more easily be converted into a charging station down the line versus just a typical parking space. This is our lowest level, and what EV capable allows us to do is meet that need, as we mentioned, where we have the power in the building, we have the electrical capacity in the building to one day much more easily get a charging station in with an EV capable space. Moving on, EV ready. What this is all of that plus the wiring and an outlet. So it's everything that EV capable is, plus the wiring we've pulled through and an outlet at that parking space. As Emil mentioned, what's very important about EV ready is that when we have that outlet, often vehicles come with their own cord. They can charge just in the outlet, even without the need for a charging station. The last important thing about the EV ready is that going from that to a charging station is simpler and easier than going from EV capable to a charging station. And then, of course, our final category is a charging station. A little more self-explanatory, that's a charging station, again, at a parking space. So this is a simplified version of what is in the current building code regarding that went into effect a little bit earlier this year. On the left, we have our building types: non-residential, single-family, multifamily. In the middle, we have the 3 categories from the prior slide. And what's really important about this table, and we've illustrated this on the far right column that we've added, is that we add these numbers together. So in a new multifamily building, anywhere in Washington, 10% of parking are charging stations, 25% EV ready, 10% EV capable, for a total of 45% of all parking that's affected. The last important thing to keep in mind here as we move forward, we've highlighted the bottom row, the multifamily category. That is the only category that we are touching in our options. What we heard from the community in the roadmap process is that the multifamily buildings are where charging is and will be needed the most. That's why we're only looking at multifamily. So before we get into the options, just want to touch on the engagement we did particular to EV readiness, right? We talked about all the engagement we did for the roadmap, and we also did this for here too. We had 2 prior drafts of different proposals that we shared and discussed and heard from stakeholders on, first in January, then over the summer. We really, in our process, sought out people who were in the know or had a very strong perspective on it to really improve our thinking, to help refine our proposals. We had about 10 presentations in total, including 2 at the Bellevue Development Committee and 1 at the Chamber of Commerce's Plush Committee, in addition to the 7 others to a wide variety of stakeholders, including developers, property managers, affordable housing providers, climate advocates, and more. And really, all of that feedback helped us, again, refine our proposals, inform our thinking, and what we have in our options, we feel, is the best marriage between what is in our ESI and comprehensive plan goals and all the feedback we heard. All that feedback could fill this entire presentation and more, but really the central tension, which I think we've heard from the community in the past few days, is weighing the balance between the benefits of EVs for our community and those potential or those increased development costs that we touched on, and we'll get into a little bit more detail. So this is a summary table of options 1 and 2. This is, again, multifamily only. The top line, I hope looks familiar. That is what is in the current state standards. You'll remember the 10% charging stations, 25% EV ready, 10% EV capable, and that 45% total on the far right. That is, again, the current state standards. The middle row is option 1. What this option would do is increase our EV ready spaces, multifamily buildings only, from 25% to 40%, which then in turn brings our total EV parking from 45% to 60%. Option 2 is very similar. Rather than EV ready, we take our EV capable spaces, multifamily only, from 10% to 25%, which in turn again brings our total up to 60%. You remember that 60% matches our projection for EVs on the road in Bellevue in 2035. Finally here, you'll note at the bottom, after a lot of discussion, we sort of put an effective date on both of these options of November 1st of next year. That gives us internally plenty of time to get ready to implement that change in our development services department, and then also very importantly, work with the community, our development community in particular, to make sure they're aware of the changes and how to navigate those. We'll show option 3 in a second, but just we believe that all 3 options are viable, but as staff, we prefer option 1. There is no formal staff recommendation. We just prefer option 1 as it's closer to, or it keeps us better on track for our ESI goals. And we'll go over this full pros and cons in a moment. This is option 3. When Emil mentioned, we stick with the state code for now. We continue to monitor the market. The building code cycle comes back again in 2026, and we potentially come back to you all during that code cycle with updated options, with updated proposals. This is a little bit more deeper dive into the costs here. Apologies for all the numbers, but we really want to make sure we're all very clear about this to, again, weigh those pros and cons. This is our typical building in Bellevue. What we're talking about here is a 250-unit mid-rise multifamily building, and this is the EV readiness costs comparing the state standards on the left to our options 1 and 2 on the middle and on the right. The difference between state and options 1 and 2 is that 0.06% and 0.07% of the total development costs that we touched on a little bit ago. So again, we're very clear, this would increase development costs. This is what this would look like for a typical building in Bellevue that we expect to see, particularly in areas like Wilburton and Bellred as the city grows, again, with our multifamily growth. Bit of a pro-con here. Again, as I mentioned, we prefer option 1 as it keeps us on track for our ESI goals, and that's really because if you recall, those EV-ready spaces, because they have the outlet there that allows a driver to charge, meaning that we're meeting the demand on day 1 as well as into the future. Again, the con here is, of course, that option 1 is the more expensive option of the 3 of them. Option 2, also because we're going to 60%, we believe keeps us on track for those ESI goals. The comparison to option 1 is that, as I mentioned, it's just a little bit more difficult to take an EV-capable space to a ready space. So we are saving money in the long run, however, a little bit less compared to option 1, or it's a little bit harder to do than option 1. Option 3, of course, the pro is that we're not increasing development costs. That's very important. Flip side is that we're sort of the missed opportunity cost there is the infrastructure in our new development. And then, of course, the potential risk for those retrofit costs if they do need the charging down the line. The last point I want to make here before we open it up to questions, unsurprisingly, we got a lot of questions, comments, feedback, and frankly, internal discussion well about affordable housing. Through the council contingency, you all have allocated, a little bit of money to help us address this need. What we intend to do is look to cover the incremental costs for 100% affordable housing properties. By incremental, we mean the difference between the state code and whatever we do in Bellevue, at least in the short term. So again, 100% affordable and looking to cover those incremental costs, state to city code. That is all we have. happy to answer questions on any of this. Thank you for your time. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Great presentation. Did you want to say anything?
Yeah,
else,
we're
Samir?
happy to elaborate on anything in the presentation, answer any questions you have, and just note, we have Greg Schrader, the city's building official in development services, who's more on the implementation, and so he can help answer questions as well. But if you want to direct them to me, I can sort them out to the right staff to answer.
Okay, great. So, council members on, let's start with you.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Wow, that was over 100 pages in that EV roadmap that was very delightful to read. So I want to thank you. Actually, that was not sarcasm. This is something that's really near and dear to me. We have been talking about our sustainable Bellevue and that effort that we need to take to get us to our 2030 and 2050 goals. And we've been talking about electrification as part of our ACEs for a long time, right? The autonomous, connected, electric, and shared. And so to me, this was a huge body of work. I mean, I found nuggets everywhere in that roadmap in terms of the type of work that we need to do together. What I really thought about was, I know we dived right into the EV in buildings, but I do want to make sure that from a framework standpoint, I really appreciate the fact that you had pieces in the roadmap about what the vision is of what we're trying to do. Sustainable, equitable, partnership, and leadership. You talked about the 5 strategies, categories, of which this is one of them. And I think those are really important. The other one that I really leaned into was the align and collaborate. And also leading by example, because we know that we have a lot of our own municipal electrification that's needed. And the reason I'm kind of framing all of this before I start to ask my questions is because I do think that the pieces that are low-lying fruit, we really need to lean into. And so when I think about new buildings where we know that the cost to make sure that we have electrical capacity and that we have the raceways in order to expand to having chargers is so important, because as soon as a building is in place, it'll be here 50, 75, 100 years. So whatever we're building today will certainly be here in 2050 when we're supposed to be reaching our sustainability goals. So with that said, though, the questions that I have is this. When we talk about our electrical grid and our capacity, is that something that is put into the mix in terms of making sure that we do have the capacity coming in? And is the expectation that the developer would ensure that that electrical capacity is available? And I'll just kind of give you these questions and then you can figure out what could be answered now. The other question I have is, when we look at our forecast, I'd like to better understand how we vet our forecast. And what I mean by that is whether, when we think about electric vehicles, what do we see in terms of people being willing to share electric vehicles in the future instead of everybody owning their electric vehicles? So I keep thinking about like the ACEs, the last one is the shared, as well as as we look at our population, do we have a good understanding of what proportion of people may not own a car? So I'm just trying to like really understand from a forecast standpoint, because there was a lot of data in there about what the vehicle adoption would be, which then would drive the number of parking stalls. And in the parking stalls, these percentages are based on the amount of parking that's provided, not the minimum that we have reduced in our code. Is that right? So whatever parking stalls are provided, these percentages that are in the tables is what's going to apply? Is that right? Okay.
Yes.
And I know we also got some feedback about potential fire safety risk and wasn't sure if that was something we had looked at. And then 2 other comments, Mayor. One is, have we looked at
flexible charging technology where they're not the fixed in place charge plugs to a wall. And I'm just curious about whether some of that technology might be available, or how we plan for they get charged, but maybe they're not charged right in the home, in their home units. And then lastly, I am curious about, with the new administration coming in, the Inflation Reduction Act dollars, whether some of that, I'm hearing, might get clawed back. So, and the state also, some of the EV adoption costs and those grants have run out of money. So in general, I'm really just trying to understand what EV adoption might look like related to some of these sources of funds that may not be as available as we thought it would be. So those are some questions I have. And then I guess lastly, I am curious about whether we could consider a modified option 2 of the capable percentage going to 40%, and what that would really look like, which was one of the comments that came from several of the commenters today. So those are questions and some comments.
Got it. Thank you, Councilmember Zahn. I think our approach tonight is going to be to give some concise answers to ones where we have information available. If it's going to be best for us to take some time to do a bit more thought on the question, we'll note that, but expect the follow-up, okay, if that's all right with you.
Perfect.
So on the electrical grid capacity and getting the power to the building, I know, Greg, you were doing some discussion on that, or Jennifer doing some discussion, so if you want to elaborate on our thoughts on the electrical capacity, and then I'll add on to it as well.
Sure, yeah, so definitely as part of the process, we've, or Colin has been engaging with PSE to try to understand what the impacts of this would be. Also trying to understand a lot of the different, incentives and technology that are out there or coming. So in general, with electric vehicles, it is better to charge your vehicle at night. So, where we're headed is to have incentives and technology that will really encourage drivers to charge their vehicles at night. So ideally, time of use, pricing, and that sort of thing. So some of that is in place now, and kind of over time that will be rolled out for all kind of different types of charging applications. So there's some exciting innovations, I think, coming our way that are in place in other parts of the country. So that's kind of one way to just handle some of the capacity concerns. And then the state code does allow for, Colin, maybe you could speak to this better than I can, about the load management software. So there's ways of kind of reducing the electrical demand with load management software that basically kind of spreads the electricity around to whoever needs it, so you can kind of reduce your costs and the impact on the grid that way. So, and then, was there any other components to that I'm kind of missing? Okay.
Let's see, on the forecast of electric vehicles, thinking about shared vehicles and shared stalls, Colin, you want to talk about the EV roadmap and how it thought about kind of changing ownership and shared models?
Yeah, I can't say that shared charging was like a major consideration in terms of moving the needle number of EVs on the road in Bellevue. What I can say is that, EV car share is sort of becoming a little more popular, and I believe is one of our strategies to continue to explore that through our community. So very briefly, I think we looked at it, but it didn't sort of move the needle in a very significant way for the projections, but it's something we'll continue to monitor and track, and potentially include as future actions on the ESI side of things.
I think the one other thing, maybe we can add to that, just in terms of how we did the forecast. We were looking at the vehicles per household in Bellevue right now and how that's changed, and then also looking at, okay, a lot of the future growth in Bellevue, most of that will go into our growth, our transit-oriented growth areas. So, we'd like to see the, vehicles per household decline then, and that's what was assumed in the comp plan update and all of that. So we looked at a lot of the modeling that was done for the comp plan EIS and how we're kind of assuming what the total number of vehicles in Bellevue will be in the future based on our growth plans and that sort of thing. So we tried to align all of our modeling as best we could with, all of that forecasting, but also the assumption being that the vehicles per household will decrease, and I'm forgetting the exact numbers, but you might remember that. So yeah, we are assuming there will be an increase in vehicles, but not totally proportionate to the growth in households.
But they can share a plug, right? So we have two vehicles that are both electric at home, and they're not always necessarily charging all the time when we're home.
Yes, you can share a plug. We do that here in the garage downstairs a bit. I think, there are some kind of sort of programmatic or behavioral questions that are kind of being figured out. I think, in some of our outreach, we did hear about buildings that have shared parking spots, and you've got to rush to get home from work to plug in your car, and then, at 8 p.m. someone's got to move their car. And so there are things like that you can do, and I think a lot of properties are trying to figure out how best do we kind of meet this need of our residents. In like a single family home, it's obviously easier, or if you happen to have, two parking spots next to each other in an apartment building, but I think it can get a little more complicated at times.
Yeah, if there are just operational solutions, that's not a capital. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And then the rest of the questions, I was curious, and I know you'll make a record of these questions and answer them for us, but she also asked the impact of increasing the capable to 40%, which would be more than your option 2 recommendation. Okay, Deputy Mayor.
Yes. Thank you so much, Mayor. Thank you, Emil. Thank you, Jennifer. Welcome, Colleen. Thank you so much for being here, and great job. And thank you, sir, as always. A great presentation. Really like the way that you present the whole thing to us. I think it was very informative. I like the way that you covered the demand side. Thank you, Councilmember Zahn, for talking about the capacity side. It seems there are good information coming from PSC and how can we do the load management. Also, I think Councilmember Zahn asked about some technology that maybe we can have I think maybe you meant wireless capacity that you don't plug in maybe.
Yeah, so what I understand is potentially there may be some mobile units that can plug, 2 vehicles in that could be moved around, and I just wondered if that was, so it was, I guess, a new memory bank for EV, right?
Yes.
That I thought they would follow up on.
And exactly as Councilmember Zahn, I would love to see if future technology maybe reduce all of these wiring and plugs and stuff. But again, that's something that I would love to know how that impact all of this. One question is for me, there was an option 3 that we just don't do anything and then we come back in 2026. What exactly would be the consequence of that? There was a small slide there. There was some, I think it was a slide, if you go back, I think a slide, maybe even in pros and cons, you had something that there is some missed opportunities. What exactly would be those missed opportunities?
Right, so we listed it out as the opportunity cost really on the construction. So if you think about, if we were to put option 1 or 2 in place, we had listed November 2025 as the date that would go into place. Right now, we do have the state code in place already, so we're covered up to that level. So it's really thinking about the delta between that period and when the 2026 consideration would happen, which would be about a year later, and projects that would occur during that time frame. So they would be doing things under the current code and wouldn't be at that higher level. So, on average, we get 600 to a few thousand apartment units per year. It does vary, definitely from year to year. So if you're thinking of, a number of projects in that time period that would be at a slightly lower standard than something that's higher. So that's the real opportunity cost.
And you said we have 600 per year?
It varies. We've been averaging about 800 new units per year over the past 7 years, and to stay on track for our housing target to 2044, we need to average about 1,550. Not all are multifamily, so it's somewhere above 1,000 units that we need to average of multifamily housing.
Thank you, sir. And one more question I have is, if we go, for example, tonight with option 1, and then in 2026, data comes that all of our demand and all of our forecasts and capacity, they're all wrong. Can we adjust then in 2026 when we are doing the update?
Yeah, in our policy view, if we've gone down a path that doesn't make sense, it's good to revisit it. So that is something that we have local control over, where we would clearly, right or wrong, if that's kind of the right term that you're stating.
Great. Thank you. Again, I think there is a loss of alignment with Bellevue's forecast with our EV growth. We are proactive planning, and I like that. I think this is the first time I am seeing some policy that addressing our EIS, so I'm very happy to see that. And as you mentioned, it is in our control, so I really appreciate that. I think the cost effectiveness, not only for people who lives there, but also for the construction and all of the EV charging at home is cheaper, obviously, than you go to this fast charger that is very expensive. I highly recommend no one do that, just go home. And then I think the fact that we are cost saving on the construction side, I think makes totally sense to me. And I think it's really balanced between proactivity and feasibility. So I like overall option 1 more than anything else in this proposal. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. The city manager sent me a little note here, and this is really confusing for all, but it's not a bad idea, given the wind and the potential of losing power before we approve our budget. We could stop this conversation here, go to the budget, and do what we need to do with that, and then come back to this. I hate to do that to us, but it's kind of the reality of the evening tonight. So would you be okay if we put this on pause for just a moment and switch gears and do our budget? Yeah. Okay. So sorry to do that to you, but we are going to go Jared, Dave, John, Conrad, me, when we get back. So have your questions ready, and we will get back at it.
Thank you, Mayor. And yes, we do apologize. We just didn't want to lose power and not be able to do the budget adoption, which is something that we do necessarily need you to take up tonight. So surprisingly, yes, John and Evan, come on up. And I'll just make this brief. Council has done a lot of work on this budget, as has the staff, and largely with John and Evan's guidance, the finance and administration team, the department directors, lots of staff, and of course, lots of input from the community. This is a balanced and prudent budget, and council, I think, addressed this with very good fiscal stewardship in mind. Yep, so we have work to do next year, and with that, I'm going to turn that over to John Risha to bring up the ordinances that need to be adopted. Thank you.
Let's go fast.
Here's the calendar, here's where we're at. Just earlier, you approved the consent, which is the first 5 of the 14 ordinances necessary, ordinances and resolutions. Before you tonight for consideration, Ordinance 6816, which is CDBG, part of the Human Services funding. Resolution 10444, which adopts and authorizes the one-time addition to the Human Services funding. The next 4 items are rates and fees, 6817 being the development services fees, and for 2025, and then 6818 is 25 and 26 sewer, 6819 is 25 and 26 water rates, 6820, again, 25, 26 storm and surface water. And then we get into Ordinance 6821, which is the property tax for only 2025. and Resolution 10445, which banks your remaining capacity for property tax, and then the umbrella ordinance of 6822, which has all of the appropriate attachments to it. Before I hand back to you, I would like to take a quick minute to thank the people and businesses of Bellevue for their care and their input throughout this process, to the leadership and the directors for all of their diligence as stewards of the public's trust and resources, our evaluation and packaging teams who did quite a lot of work and stepped out of their own regular roles and really came into that one city space to help us wrestle with the budget, to our fiscal staff throughout the city, who really helped shape the information that was the storytelling for the basis of this budget, to our budget team led by our own Evan Phillips, who put in long hours to make this budget more transparent and more relatable. And I'd like to thank you, Mayor and council members, for all of your support and your openness in this and steadfast guidance throughout this process. It has been a pleasure to get us to this point. And with that, I commend the 25-26 preliminary budget as amended to you for your consideration.
Thank you so much. So as we see up here, we're on the screen, we have before us ordinances A through F that we are going to ask to adopt all in one motion. So let's start with that motion.
I move to adopt ordinance 6816, resolution 10444, ordinance 6817, ordinance 6818, ordinance 6819, and ordinance 6820.
Second.
Are there any comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, excellent. So now we're going to take these next three ordinances one at a time. And did you want to speak to these, or shall we just do the motion?
I think they're ready to go, Mayor.
Okay. Deputy Mayor,
I move to adopt ordinance 6821, establishing the amount of property taxes to be levied for the year 2025, the first year of the City of Bellevue's 2025-2026 fiscal biennium, and establishing an effective date.
Second.
any comments or questions?
Clarification, this is the 1% property tax, right?
Councilmember, it does include the 1% increase in the property tax.
It includes,
Correct.
but it's not just the 1%.
Correct.
Would the 1% be a separate?
No, it is part of
Consideration.
this ordinance.
I'm not sure, did you, it's in the packet.
I
It's
know.
item G. I guess you need to explain to him the property tax increase.
Yeah, so the 1% generates about $900,000 worth of revenue, of which I believe 46% is tied to voter-approved levies. So your 2022 parks levy, your fire and transportation levies also benefit by the 1% as well. So that 1%, the 900K, about 46% is going to those voter-approved levies.
And that is included in this piece of legislation.
Correct.
Okay, so not all of it is specifically dedicated to expenditure. Some of it is not, or all of it is not.
All of the revenue comes in, and that goes to pay the various general fund expenditures that the appropriations of Ordinance 68-2022 would authorize. So it is all revenue that comes in that is expendable.
It's expendable. Is it designated already?
Only in that it is general fund revenue, or if it is specifically restricted by levy.
Or, that means, is it? or
Some of
had-
it is and some of it is not.
Okay. All right, that makes it difficult. Okay, as an exception, I would support it.
Okay.
Normally, I would not, because I would like to have all the revenue designated to expenditures. In this case, some of it is not, but I don't know how much of it. But it's nominal enough, I would go for it.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions?
It's a question of why can't we pull that out as a separate item, the 1%, as we've done in previous years?
There's nothing to say that we couldn't. I believe last time around, we did combine them into one because we had established that past practice over, I want to say 8 over the last 9 years, we've included the 1%. But that's really a council's prerogative. This is just past practice from the last time.
I question, because from my recollection, it's always been separate. It's not been combined with anything else. I was voted that way.
We are voting on the property taxes separately from everything else, and that is what we have done historically. So that's why we're just voting on item G, the 2025 property taxes. Any other comments or questions?
I just have to say, I think Councilmember Lee is correct, that the 1% was pulled out as a separate item that we voted on. And you're agreeing with me, it looks like, yes.
Mr. Phillips was letting me know that there has been some different ways of doing it, sometimes included, sometimes not included. We had gone with the last practice and had carried that forward for today's adoption.
That's correct.
So we're doing it the way we did it last budget?
That is correct.
All right. Any other comments or questions?
Can I make a request? Could we, at the next budget, 2 years from now, maybe have some conversation on this?
Yes,
Would that
you
be
may.
okay?
Yes.
As a member of your house? Thank
Yes.
you.
And the next time we'll be voting on this is next November for the 26 property taxes, so we can have that conversation as part of the mid-buy.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, next is H, which is the banking property tax capacity.
I move to adopt Resolution 10-445, providing for the banking of levy capacity.
Second?
Any comments or questions on that? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and then the last on this is I, which is an ordinance, the 2025-26 appropriation by fund and the 2025-2030 CIP.
I move to adopt Ordinance 6822, adopting the City of Bellevue's 2025-2026 biennial budget and 2025-2030 capital improvement program plan,
Second.
setting forth the estimated revenues and appropriations and incorporating by reference pay grades and employment classifications.
And establishing an effective date. I have that on mine. There's one last segment.
And establishing an effective date.
Oh, this, second.
All right. Any comments or questions on this?
That's the way it reads.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, I want to give council a moment to comment on the budget. We do want to get back to the other thing, but this is a big moment in our jobs as council members. And so let's start with Councilmember Lee. Can you keep it to a small amount? We're all going to keep our comments short, but I'll start with you since you've
I
been
will
on.
make it as short as possible because I already commented it a number of times. I want to say that this has been a very good process, and I want to compliment Mr. Risha for making it transparent, make it easier to discuss and understand, and also because of what's happened, we implemented certain double budgeting. As a result, the bottom line is we actually have a lower budget than previously, even though we are doing more stuff. And so I think these are all good features. I hope that because of transparency, if we have a precedent as we have now to understand better how to work this, we can do a better job at it, to make sure that we have more areas and issues to discuss and have better conversation among the council members. One thing that I felt that just for the benefit of the council, the item that we have at our disposal, a council contingency, compared to the total budget is extremely minimal. So I hope that we can have a better influence of what we actually can affect the performance of the city on behalf of the citizens. Because we indeed represent the public. We indeed have the trust. We indeed hear the public. We indeed communicate with them, and they hear from us. So I hope that we take that in mind and we take that into consideration. Thank you.
That sounds like a good retreat conversation, Councilmember Lee, so thank you for bringing that up. Councilmember Stokes.
No, I think our budget process has been really amazing this year, although I think we've always had a good budget, conversations, things set out, but I do think that we've advanced quite a bit in terms of communication, the way it's been presented and all, and that's part of the growth. I mean, you go back in 2012, when I came on council, the budget was so different and the process was different, but we've always, I think, actually brought the information to the public, brought the information to ourselves. I don't think we've ever taken votes where we really didn't know what we were doing or we had missed something. I think we've had it, but we go forward, and I really appreciate it. And I think this is the best all around collaboration and work with both the community, people coming down here to talk to us, the businesses and everything, and ourselves, and working with the council. So I'm very excited about this, and I think we're on a good path. We could talk about all these in detail, but I think we got ourselves set up and the city is set up to really move forward. And we can look around now from what's now here, back 10 years ago, and it's now because we have done a great job on our budgets and our spending and the way we work it. So I'm really ready to go vote on these.
Thank you, Councilmember Stokes. Councilmember Zahn.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Evan and John, and all the staff that worked on it, plus all the feedback. I think that this year in particular, I felt like we spent even more time really scrubbing and understanding and building up the budget from top to bottom, and new format. I really like the thoughtfulness of how you looked at the budget, and I agree with my colleagues about the $1.75 billion budget that doesn't carry a bunch of contingency amongst a bunch of places, and really consolidating that. I think it's more clear and it's more transparent to us as well as the community as well. So I appreciate that. I do think this was a really tough budget. Although I'm really blessed that as a city, our revenue is flat when many other cities' revenues have seen a decline. What we also know is that the community needs are getting greater. So we know that we have not been able to fully fund human services. There's a lot of transportation and Vision Zero needs, sustainability, more funding for the arts, city services and facilities, and housing. So as we move forward, I am really looking forward to the time we're going to spend together at the retreats and also in the mid-buy. I know we talked about taking that extra time to look at what are some potential other ways that we can increase our investments, because we do need more revenue in order to meet the unfunded needs that we saw as we were looking through the memory bank. And I do appreciate having the memory bank, because as we go into the retreat, those are the areas where we're going to be able to identify places where we haven't been able to sufficiently fund for the gap. I mean, the 20 million of ARPA funding that was one time, where does that come from? Because those needs are there in our community. We saw that during COVID and coming out of it. So I just look forward to working with my colleagues and the staff and the community to figure out how do we take that next step, because now we have a comp plan. We got all these other plans coming. There's going to be even more of an ask for investments from the city. So thank you.
Councilmember Neuenhuis.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, this was a good process. This is your first time around too, right, John? Wasn't it? Yes? First time.
For the city,
correct?
yes.
Yeah, for the city, correct. Not overall, not in your entire career. No, not at all. No, I thought it was a good process. As Councilmember Zahn noted, it was a little bit challenging in some ways, certainly with revenues being flat into the city. However, Bellevue, and thanks to the, I guess, historical fiscal prudence that we've taken as a city and as a council for many, many years, we were better off than most. It's very difficult to hear other cities. In fact, a city manager and I, in the AWC meeting, hearing from other cities across the region that are struggling. And having to really make up very large deficits and having to even cut personnel, which is always a very difficult thing to do. So, but first and foremost, I want to thank all the residents who emailed us and called and came down to share their thoughts, their concerns, their their thoughts about the budget. I want to thank all the stakeholders and the groups, be it PSA or the chamber, BDA, et cetera. There was a lot of input here. I want to thank my colleagues for all the great questions. Love the memory bank. Let's be sure to hold on to that in 2 years' time to revisit that. Yes, there's a lot of need. And additional revenue may or may not be needed. I'd also like us to look at other ways that maybe we can be more efficient as a city. First, before looking at ways of generating additional revenue, but ways that we can be more efficient, streamlined, et cetera. Not to say that we don't already look at those things, but I'd love to start there before looking at ways to generate additional revenue. We didn't get everything that probably a lot of us wanted this budget. I in particular really wanted to get a few things past the finish line, but it's probably a good compromise that not all of us got exactly what we wanted. But in terms of next time around, would like to see that 1% increase to the property tax as a separate item next time around. And I think other than that, I think this was just a really, really good process, and really appreciate the way we've changed it a little bit from past years as well. Want to also thank the leadership here, the city manager and her leadership team, all the department heads who put this budget together as well, did an outstanding job. So good job all around. Thank you so much.
Councilmember Hamilton.
Thank you, Mayor. Just want to echo many of the same comments that have already been made. Certainly appreciate all of the public input on this. It's amazing to me the wealth of knowledge that exists in this community and the willingness that people have to share that with us. So I think that was really impactful. Certainly appreciate the tremendous work that staff has done. Diane, John, everybody else involved. You managed us through a really good process. And I think, you were careful along the way, too, to kind of clean things up a bit, maybe set us up for a good, efficient budget process going forward. So I think it's always great when you get in the middle of a process to see what you can do to improve it for the next time. So appreciate that. My colleagues as well for their support of me and going through my first budget, and just the diligence with which they approached this budget work was really inspiring. We've talked about it plenty, that we have a constrained budget this year. But I think even with that, we made a number of strategically impactful investments. And two, I think coming in for my first time, it is certainly much easier to do this work when there aren't a lot of problems to have to fix. And the fact that the city's been so well run, we have such a strong financial foundation. It's without that, we couldn't do anything else. So to have that is just a critical starting point, and I'm glad that we do. And I'm glad this is done, but as I've said, a little rest for the weary, but not too much. I think there's a lot more work that needs to get done. So in the new year, I'm looking at making some investments that we probably should have, but could not in this budget, and to take a look at that and see what we can do in the new year to make some other critical investments. So really well done, and appreciate being involved in this process. So thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I also wanted to thank all of our community and stakeholders. The trust and collaboration between them and the city is amazing, and they help us through everything. Of course, thank you, City Manager, and all of the departments for their input. But really, thank you also, John, Evan, and the entire finance and asset management team. Your hard work and comprehensive preparation on this 2025-2026 budget and CIP was amazing. It was very transparent. It's really clear to me that you really listen to everyone, our community, our stakeholders, the City Council, my colleagues here, and thoughtfully incorporated all of these feedbacks. Really, I saw amazing alignment between Bellevue's values and Council's vision from all of our strategy target, environmental stewardship, enhanced human services, public safety, Vision Zero, transportation, infrastructure, all of them were included, especially under this flat budget. I really believe this is a very balanced and community-centered budget, so really, really appreciate all of these. And I think on the side note, we should also celebrate, I think this is the first time Councilmember Lee voted yes to the 1%.
It's the second time.
Second time? Oh, second. Okay. So forget about the last comment. Thank you so much.
You know, you came in and you did a budget overhaul before we even started this process, and you reconciled our entire system in a way that made it much more accurate and realistic. And we have a lot of cities around us and entities that have started with a huge budget deficit, and they've had to reconcile that. We are lucky to have a flat budget, and I feel like the result, and I think I say this every year, but it's true every year, it's responsive and it's responsible. And so I really appreciate the work that everybody involved has done here, and the community input was incredible. I look forward to the mid-buy conversation. I really hope that maybe we generate more revenue than we anticipated, and that we can put in some things that we weren't able to put in this part of the budget. So that will be a robust conversation, I'm sure. But I want to thank my fellow council members for their excellent work and due diligence and input on this. And it's a budget I'm really proud of, so thank you. Okay. Now we're going to go backwards and go back to our EV charging conversation, even though we should be celebrating, but we'll do that soon. And we'll get our staff back up here, and we'll get maybe get the slide back up that we had with the different options. And we don't have to make any decisions tonight. We're just,
We lost one staff member.
I think
oh,
I think you might have just. Here it goes.
take your time. So, Councilmember Newenhouse, we are on you with this, if you're ready to make comments or ask questions.
Welcome back. All right, I've got to pull that up too as we shift back to that, because I have the PowerPoint up. There it is. Thank you. There we go. No, really appreciate a lot of the great questions that we've had already on this, and great comments overall. You know, if ever, from my perspective, a balanced approach is needed here, it's this, because, you know, as a council, we've obviously prioritized maximizing the amount of affordable housing in Bellevue. At the same time, we want to maximize the reduction of emissions in our city as well. And you know, there lies a concern for me in terms of how we balance that when I see the increased costs that developers will have if we go with option one or option two compared to option three. So a couple additional questions or comments. Some have been raised already. I like EV capable a lot more than I do actual wired, because I think technology is speeding so fast. Just as a super quick example, when I was on a city study tour in Detroit, they had developed agnostic charging. So it didn't matter what brand of EV vehicle you had, just parking on a pad that could be electrified and they could charge the car right there. It did not require wires or plug-ins or anything like that. So, and I think my colleagues share my interest there in terms of let's not go too fast now in one direction in terms of what charging might look like in 2, 3, 4, 10 years from now. I think it could look very different than the way it looks right now. And on the survey, I had one question about, was in terms of those that wanted to charge at home, was that all residents in terms of single family and multifamily, or were we able just to get those stats from multifamily?
Yeah, Colin, why do you go ahead and answer that question?
That 85%, which I believe you're referring to, that came from the entire swath of the community.
Okay.
Multifamily, single family, all of the above.
Okay, okay, so we don't, okay. I think that's important if we were able to delineate those differences, but maybe with other outreach, we can hone in on that a little bit more. What I've heard from some property owners, and maybe you ran into this, but I'd love it if you could confirm it in some of your conversations that you've had with other stakeholders, are people, I mean, everyone wants the luxury of charging at home. However, some of these property owners have told me that a lot of times the tenants prefer to charge their car at work, mainly because it's cheaper. So if it's Amazon or Microsoft or whatever it might be, wherever they're charging their car is cheaper. So that's where they prefer to charge and not at their home per se. Did you hear that feedback as well? I mean, I've heard that from 5 to 6 different property owners, but I'd like to know if you heard similar comments or not, and how that played into your recommendation.
Go ahead, Jennifer. Colin.
Sure, yeah, I think we heard that a bit when we were presenting to the Chamber Plush Committee. Colin, I'm trying to remember if we heard that prior to that.
Not as much, no. I mean, what we heard a lot was just like the convenience of charging home. We certainly heard from our community, and I think also just generally out in the world, that the advantage of charging at work is often that some employers do offer it for free or significantly
reduced cost.
cheaper. Yeah, exactly. I mean, then again, like the 85% at home, 85% people want to charge at home. Over work, that's from the survey as well. So I think a little bit, but by and large, the at home was sort of the main takeaway for us from the outreach we did.
Okay. In a letter from the Plush Committee at the Chamber, they were recommending conversations or consulting with PSE and the fire department insurance specialists. It sounds like there's been some conversations with PSE, but how engaged have we been so far with PSE as well as our fire department insurance specialists so far? The fire department in terms of any potential fire safety risk, and then also on the insurance specialist regarding liability and implications. Has outreach been done on all three of those, and to what extent?
Yeah, so Colin, Jennifer, why don't you go ahead on the PSC, and then Greg on the fire.
Do you want to speak to that, Colin?
Sure. Yeah, we talked to PSE quite a bit. So again, we had 2 prior drafts of the proposal that you've seen tonight. First back in January, and then over the summer, sort of during the process of developing both of those, we talked to PSE to really make sure that what we were doing was in alignment with or not going above anything that they couldn't already do. If you ask PSE, they will tell you that, I mean, it's a hard problem, right? And they are working on just electrification more broadly. for Bellevue and their entire service territory. They will give you a lot of different methods for how they're addressing that challenge, both on the supply side, more production, and also on the demand side in terms of encouraging people to charge at night or to sort of bring down that load at a certain time. I think the really high level takeaway when we talk to them is that nothing we're doing, because again, this is already in the code, nothing we're proposing here is going above things they're already planning for in all the work they're doing.
Okay. I think I understand what you said, but this is one of the reasons why I had asked for this electrical study or power study to capture all power, all sources of power coming into the city of Bellevue due to our level of growth, these EV chargers, et cetera. And boy, I would love to see that study completed before we made a decision like this. Given the impact and continual impact this will have on our grid, and especially as we continue to grow as quickly as we are. I think that's going to be an important data point and important information for us. As much as I want to have as many EV chargers capable out there to, again, either pull off cars off the road or our environment. At the same time, I'm also concerned about just the impact of the overall grid and us being able to power all this. So I'm not sure I'm necessarily at this point really in favor of any option. I would like to see some more data and have some more answers some of our great questions by my colleagues here as well. And then also the further the impact that we're going to have on affordable housing in our city, which again I think is our number one priority as a council. And I really wouldn't want to see anything dramatically. And it doesn't sound like it would be dramatic, but it would be increased costs. And I appreciate, what was it, slide? Sorry, when you had the numbers broken down, was that slide 8 or 9? Was that wasn't total cost, right? Was that cost per parking spot or per EV charger?
Slide 8.
Slide 8.
Oops, sorry. Which bullet point are you referring to specifically?
No, the one that had the actual charges or the actual cost per option. That slide.
One moment.
Yeah.
Yep.
There it was. Yeah. Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is the total cost of EV readiness that are in the code options, or that is in the code state standards. So this is the combined charging stations, EV ready, EV capable, and this is for that example building, that 250 unit mid-rise multifamily building. So this is all in EV readiness, all three categories for that building.
For that, on a 250 unit mid-rise building?
Yes, when the total development cost there at the bottom.
Okay, okay. Were nonprofits like, Habitat for Humanity and others, were they a part of those conversations at the plush meetings? Or how many other conversations have you had with, nonprofits that are building affordable housing?
We talked to 4 affordable housing providers across Bellevue. I can't say that Habitat for Humanity was one of them. We did talk to 4 affordable housing providers and got their input and their feedback on this proposal.
Okay, and what was that? Just overarching, what was their feedback on this?
I think pretty mixed between them, right? I mean, they have their own opinions. I think generally speaking, what we heard was concerns about development costs, right? Mm-hmm. We had explored other options for how to address the affordable housing issue, and one thing that they really pushed back on was wanting to exempt them. They don't want our low-income community members to not have access to the benefits of EVs, and so they really didn't want to not be part of this, right? Okay. They're of course concerned about the development costs. Their opinions varied between the 4 of them. Mm-hmm. I think that's a fairly succinct summary. Yeah.
Okay. So would it be possible to apply for grants or have some type of ability to subsidize costs for affordable housing in order to enable them to have additional chargers?
So in the preliminary budget that you
Yeah.
just adopted, there
Yeah.
was the 50,000 that was added
Right.
in. And that would, potentially be a program that could help out with that incremental difference between the current state standards and if the council chose to go above those code
Yeah.
standards.
But that's 50,000, just 50,000, just for one building, it would be an additional $77,000, correct? If it was option one. That's just for one building. So the 50 grand wouldn't go very far.
Yeah, these would be for, 100% affordable buildings and affordable projects. Some of them can be up to 250. That's a typical 100% affordable building is going to be a bit smaller than that. So usually they're in the 100 to 150 range, though they can be up to that size.
Okay.
I think we base that number on I think we on average get about 100 affordable housing units online in 100% affordable housing buildings. So we were kind of, using that assumption around $30,000 or so a year, maybe more like up to 60, based on how many, new construction, 100% affordable housing units there are.
Okay, great. All right, thank you. Thank you for your answers.
Do we want to have Matt Larson weigh in on anything to do with capacity?
No pressure.
You're here.
Not that we want to put you on the spot or anything.
Yeah, that's okay. I don't know where you want me to stand or take my.
Oh, do you want to come sit here?
Yeah, Colin and I had an opportunity to speak a bit during the break. I think I would really be excited about is, I think we're at a point, we spoke several months ago with Colin. One area that has been raised in the policies that I think is very crucial for both the city and PSC is what's called bidirectional charging. And I would want to see in this policy that bidirectional charging is where you can pull the power not only into a vehicle, but out of the vehicle and back to the building or back to the grid. And I'll be as succinct as I can. The importance of that is it's along with other distributed energy resources a way to mitigate the impacts of having to grow the grid meeting these increased loads. So EVs, thousands of EVs in the community can be a huge burden on the system to where we have to upgrade substations and transmission lines and distribution lines. And you all know how fun Energized Eastside was dealing with that for 10 years. Now imagine doing that fivefold over. So the more we can mitigate the amount of having to build up the grid infrastructure, the better. So when you have EVs, a typical one in the market right now is probably coming out with a 7 kilowatt hour battery. So you multiply that by 15 vehicles and you have about a megawatt. A megawatt can serve 200 to 1,000 households. So it's a pretty significant amount of power just in 15 vehicles that can be pulled back to the community. It literally could power the entire city if you have thousands of vehicles that could be plugged in a technology that's, again, in a 20-year time frame or 15, 20 years in the future. But that technology is happening right now. Bidirectional vehicles are coming on the market. There's a dozen or more that came on the market this year and many more that are coming on next year. So to simplify it, the only concern I would have is the conduit incapable already, or the wiring sizes, or the conduit sized. We have to, I did get an answer, Colin, several months ago, but I want to make sure we're sure that the conduit sizing is such that it would support a bidirectional charging technology or wiring size or communication lines that would go into that conduit. It would be rather tragic if you put this capable infrastructure in only to find out 5 years later that a lot of the conduit isn't sized appropriately to support bidirectional charging, which would be inadequate for both the city and PSC for our needs for a future virtual power plant. By virtual power plant, what I mean is it's when, I'll give another example. We use our Nest thermostats for all those that sign up for that demand response. We can reach out during a cold winter event and just dial everyone's thermostats down a couple degrees. You could override it if you want, but we've been, in peak events, we've been able to shave up to 40 or 50 megawatts off of the system by just dialing down thousands of homes on their thermostat. That's the equivalent of like putting a Snoqualmie Falls hydro plant onto the system by taking that power off the system, if you understand what I'm saying. And the good thing is it's happening in the community, so again, you don't need the infrastructure to deliver the power that doesn't need to be delivered. So the EVs in the future would play that similar role, but be one of the largest pieces of that sort of demand response or virtual power plant. And then, so again, the questions I have more questions right now than answers because I didn't have a chance to tap into a lot of the subject matter experts in various teams within PSC to look at this. But the readiness infrastructure, for example, with the wires that would be put in, I wouldn't want to see that we'd have to pull the wires out again 4 or 5 or 6 or 10 years down the road because the wires weren't sufficient for bidirectional charging. if that's the way the city and we chose to go. So what I would welcome and be excited about was, and I can commit to you, since I'm the guy that's supposed to be responsible for policy issues in this jurisdiction in PSC, is to reach out. I've already had a conversation with a few folks and put together a bit of a multi-jurisdictional team within PSC, and have them look thoroughly at this policy, and see if we can't tweak it and give feedback to you, and then involve Colin and his team to fine tune that a bit, and then see where to proceed from there. I have questions too about what is, there's infrastructure in these policies that really pertain to two different components. One is what happens on the front of the meter, in other words, everything on the public side or PSC side that feeds the meter, and then everything on the customer side. And so I want to suss out, working with what limitations we have with UTC and all that, to say what does ready or capable look like on that PSC side of the meter versus what you're doing on the customer side of the meter, if that makes sense, because it gets to the capacity issue. And that's the simple question I was asked, was capacity, which is not sure what that looks like if we require a transformer to be put in, for example, on the PSC side of the equation, that sits there for 5 years or more and isn't really utilized until those chargers are actually plugged in. Or does it make more sense to just make sure a vault is sized to accommodate a future transformer and the conduit for the wiring and so forth? So hopefully that gets a bit to your question, but I would commit to you that I would be excited to see if we can't do a more thorough deep dive in looking at Bellevue's policies. The importance to me is Bellevue's a big city. There's going to be a lot of cities, not only in King County, but then across our 10 county jurisdictions that will look at you setting the lead. And what you set will probably have a lot of folks following you. And so if we can really fine tune this and dial this right, I think it would not only serve the city well and PSC well, but many other communities as well. So sorry if that took a little too much
That
time.
was terrific. That was very helpful. I'm kind of astounded that we're not collaborating with you more closely on this, because it seems like we need to be looking at the whole picture before we make recommendations. So appreciate your input. And I'll just make my comment. I think what you said kind of underscores what everybody is asking, which is the infrastructure changing so rapidly that we should wait until we all kind of settle on something that's going to serve the future and the current needs. And even with your pad, your charging pad, you still need the wires to charge the pad. And so I would be really interested to know what kind of, readiness we need to have to accommodate the different capacities.
Mayor, if I could add, I didn't want to, I hope none of my comments suggested that I was
you're
throwing your staff
fine.
under the bus, or that they weren't
No,
doing
you're
a
not.
good job communicating with PSC. Some of that's on us. I mean, Colin's been talking with some folks. We are sort of in the same dilemma where there's these new technologies coming on the horizon, and we haven't had SMEs and other folks sort of looking at a comprehensive look at that. So I think this is an opportunity for us to pull people from different, expertise within the company and say, hey, let's strategically with Bellevue look more comprehensively at how we can do this better and pull it together and communicate then more effectively to Colin and his team. So I applaud the work they're doing. I think this is exciting work and very important work, not only for the city, but for PSC. And it makes perfectly good sense for me for the developers' interest too, because it's really saving them a lot of money down the road if they're investing in infrastructure and not, again, absorbing costs that could run 8 or 10 times more to dig up and redo that infrastructure down the road.
So you kind of answered all my questions in advance. So I appreciate that, and I definitely appreciate staff's work on this. I just think that this is an asset that we have in our backyard that we could maybe save some trouble down the road if we get more information. So that's helpful. I just want to make sure that we include in our legislative agenda anything that we need to be advocating for to make this a regional effort and something that will be successful in the long term. Okay, Councilmember Hamilton.
Thank you, Mayor. I think I just want to start off by just hoping, and I don't think I'm in favor of providing any direction tonight. I think for a few reasons. I mean, the more we go through this, the more questions we have. And so I think that just logically, that seems to be the direction we're headed. I'll also just mention that I had it on good authority earlier this morning that this was going to be information only. And so as a part of the communication I've had with various stakeholders, I conveyed that message. So I think some folks that would have weighed in after hearing that have decided not to. So I think they should all be given the chance to be engaged. So I'm definitely not in favor of providing any direction. Appreciate the presentation. I appreciate all the questions that have been answered, and more answers coming. And so, and while I may be new to the EV infrastructure discussion, it's clear from all the work that you've done, voluminous bit of work here that we've had a chance to see, that, staff has certainly been hard at work creating this plan. So I think that's great. And clearly, we have a need for it. There's a demand. Community members are very interested. But, great effort on that. Appreciate that. The information in the packet was really extensive. And I really do hope that we extend the conversation beyond tonight, as I get up to speed on this very important issue. And again, so that all the stakeholders have a chance to provide more input. I'll just kind of note in going through some of the materials that a lot has been done. So in 22, the Department of Ecology adopted the California standard, requiring that for model year 2035 and beyond, 100% of new vehicles sold in Washington will be zero emission, headed in the right direction. February of just this year, the Washington State Department of Commerce published the Transportation Electrification Strategy, which lays out the future of the EV transition through 2035. March of this year, the updated state building code went into effect, impacting all new construction. It added new requirements for EV charging in new non-residential, single-family and multifamily buildings. So I think the state has done a good job. I think they've been appropriately aggressive in their approach to EV infrastructure. Also, as has been mentioned already, we just provided funding to initiate updates to our affordable housing strategy and environmental stewardship plans. And as Councilmember Neuenhuis mentioned, funding for the study on energy capacity needs and gap analysis. So a lot more work coming. I just think, I think that work is really important, and I don't think we should be moving forward until we've had a chance to complete more of that work, and it can inform the EV standards that we're talking about. And, we've had a little mention of cost of housing and how this might impact the cost of housing. And I think that's important to keep in mind. I think it's also important to keep in mind that we're talking about for-profit and nonprofit housing developers. I've talked with a number of folks from both camps. There is universal agreement that either option 1 or 2 is difficult for them. And it's not just that it adds cost to developing and building the project, but I think especially for nonprofit developers, there's the cost after the fact. There's the maintenance, there's the complexity of having these systems in place. So they have a lot more to deal with the EV charging infrastructure that would be a part of their facilities. And then too, I hope that as we continue to analyze the best path forward for increasing EV infrastructure and considering grants for 100% affordable housing suppliers, that, that grant might also apply to some of the ongoing maintenance. And I'd like to see us also help out anyone who provides affordable housing. And not at 100%. I would like to see a project that was at 70 or 60%. Also be able to qualify for some grant funding. So I think, higher standards make sense. I am particularly interested in looking at EV-capable parking and maybe what we can look at there to kind of up the standard. I have a couple of quick questions for you. In the presentation on page 9, I just want to be sure that I'm clear about what we're looking at here. With some of the symbols, it was a little confusing to me. For example, EV capable. I'm seeing some lightning bolts there in that category, but really what we're talking about is just the conduit, right? I mean, there's no electricity at the beginning, there's none at the end, right? So, I mean, basically, that's just an open tunnel.
That is correct. That signifies just the conduit there.
Okay. And then for EV Ready, is that where someone could bring their own charger and they plug it into something that's there and go
Yeah,
about
correct.
charging?
Quite a few of the models of cars have basically a cable and a plug that you can plug into a socket. It's not as fast as the level 2 charger, but you are able to charge your car.
And how does a multifamily development charge for something like that?
Colin or Jennifer, you want to go over the kind of the operations of multifamily projects?
Yeah, I can speak to that. I mean, I think that the EV Ready, I think that would be sort of I think that frankly that'd be a real challenge for that particular building at that location. Frankly, that's something that Matt just put in my ear 20 minutes ago when we were talking outside. So I think to be very clear, I think that is sort of a constraint or a flaw in that EV Ready idea. I think the main idea is because you have the outlet there, getting to the charging station is much easier. Although I think your point is very, I think what you said is very correct. That would be certainly a challenge that building would have to work through, and I think that's something that buildings will start to address as that becomes an issue.
But yeah, I think in terms of just how property managers are handling it, I think from some of our outreach, we heard a little more anecdotally, people are paying maybe, I don't know, $200 a month or so for a parking spot with EV charging. I'm not sure what the sort of market rate for parking is here, probably around $150 a month. So I think it's just kind of getting baked in. And I think, property managers have sort of different ways of passing on the costs or, making up for the cost of the infrastructure.
Okay, all right. Okay, great. Again, I mean, a lot of good work. This is super important. I know there's a big demand for it. I'm glad we're looking at it. I do hope that we take some additional time here to have some more questions answered, have a little bit more engagement before we have to make a decision.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, Councilmember Stokes.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for this presentation. I think it was really good, and your continued work to accomplish the environmental sustainability goals, I think, is very important. We didn't talk about that much, but that is something that is in effect a bonus in a sense, and when we get these going. I know how much we've heard from the community members about the need to keep making progress in both of these areas. And I think that's very important to get this going. And again, we need to work on that more, I think. I'd also like to, talk more about the multifamily affordable housing projects and how EV access, and listening to Matt Larson's comments is, I think, some ideas about things we can do on that too. And this will accomplish, we're talking now about going to 3 different groups and goals, and the environmental, what am I trying to say? The community members are really important, and same thing with affordable housing groups and with the regular public. And I think we're doing a lot that's going to be, in the long range, a lot more amazing in helping people and helping this, help us grow by working together on this. I liked Councilmember Hamilton's, and I'm saying this very positive, musings about this. I mean, you were really getting into how these things go and how we put together. And lastly, I think the work that's been, and what you've done for the staff is what we put together is really amazing, because we couldn't have these conversations with this being put in front of us. And I think, I'm not sure I would ready to go for either one of these at this point, but they have the whole basic things we can do. And it's just a lot of numbers, how we're going to fit this in. And when looking at the time frames, there's not a whole lot of difference between 3. I mean, maybe a year or something. We're going to be working for a year or another year or 2 years on this. So we can't really make a decision tonight. We're going to do A as opposed to B. But I think you have really provided something and pulled this together that we've never, the rest of us, the council, most people in the public would really how we'd understand this. So this has been amazing. I think you've really pushed this thing forward. And I'm really glad we had a conversational meeting tonight about this, not going to some decision, because we're not ready for that, I don't think, at all. And I think what we're going to come out of this is something even better than we've thought about at this point. So I'm just really excited about this. I think this is really good. This is something that is going into the future, and we need to be ahead of that and working with that. And, you know, the new things that have come up in terms of the exchange of the electricity, how people deal with it, you know, and where you put them is not really a question. You know, you can, people need to have access to them anyhow. So anyhow, I'm really excited about this, and I think this is a huge step forward. We're not ready to do anything tonight, obviously, but I think in a year or so, well, we have the state stuff we work with, but in a year or so, I think we can really nail this thing. So I'm excited about it and appreciate very much the work that's been done.
Thank you. Councilmember Lee.
Well, I appreciate the tough work you're doing. I mean, you're working with lots of variables, always changing. You're working with human behavior, which you're lucky to know what it is, and you're even luckier if you know what's going to change to be. You know, that's not easy. And at the same time, you are working with you know, different standards, different interests, and the stakeholders you're working with. It's not, you know, you really don't know. You may satisfy one group, may not satisfy the others. But I think you've done as much as you can. The point is that you try to set the standard right now. I think that's almost an impossible task. You have to do it in a way that is flexible. You have to be. And have to be prepared for changes. And you have to be prepared for lots of stuff, technology, innovation. You know, we heard from PSC, right? There'll be new ways of doing things. If you do something now, you could affect something else we may not even be aware of. You may not even talk to them unless you spend the time. And if you do, you're going to be talking about only certain parameters. And so they invited you to talk to them. So you're just beginning to discuss all this, right? So how are we going to make decisions, you know, when you just begin to talk about something, or you're not even aware of what's going to affect other things, what's going to happen? So I think this is really a moving target. But it's a process. It's something you have to do. And I believe that we need to be honest with ourselves. We cannot just say, well, this is it. We have to say that this is a baseline, at least. A baseline would be something, hopefully, council could help you. Talking to the environmental group, talking to the stakeholders, whatever that may be. In order to know that, we have to talk to them, right? You have to talk to them. We have to talk to them. They talk to us. So we can come together and say, is this baseline reasonable? Can we do it? How about the cost? Is it reasonable? If we don't make it work, what's the sunk cost? What can we do? Is there any flexibility to make it work or not work? You know, I mean, these are the things that need to be discussed. So it's not easy. But I believe that, you know, you're coming to ask us, I believe. He said, saying that what is the policy? We don't know what the policy is. We're learning. We can give you guidance. That's all. Guidance is what we've been talking to you about. We've been telling you. We've been asking you questions as if we are stakeholders. Some of us understand the building community, the builder. Some of us will understand the environmental folks. Some of us understand, you know, maybe a couple of those perspectives. Then we can share it with you on the table. Then we can come up with some solutions. Then we can say, well, that's what we got. What do you guys think? So it's got to come to a consensus. At least it's something people can agree to. Then if we do it, well, we got something. You know, PSC said, we talk to you, we give you our perspective, we give you our caveat. They will tell you, they're honest. They're gonna say that this is absolutely correct. No, they're gonna say that maybe it work, maybe it won't, but hey, what's the risk? Should we try it? You know, so I think all the party has to be involved. If we do that, I think we have a real good chance. I believe Bellevue has always been a very consensus-building, collaborative community. And if we work on that basis, I think we can continue to be a collaborative city. So there's a lot of things we don't know. You mentioned about, ACES, autonomous, what's the word? C means connected, E, electric, S, shared. In the future, it may not be electric. Right now, we talk about, reduce greenhouse gas. In the future, we may be using hydrogen. Elon Musk may not be building electric vehicle. Who knows? He's building hydrogen vehicle. It may be sooner than we think. I don't know. I'm just saying all these things. Who knows what happens? So the people who are doing things, we got to understand the possibilities and be prepared and be doing things by certain standards so that we know if it doesn't happen, we're okay. If it happens, we're right at the point. If we are correct, we'll be way ahead of the curve. I think that's how we should do business. So I think it makes sense. So I think you guys are on the right track, but just make sure that you are understanding change, understanding innovation is going to happen, understanding each jurisdiction have different standards. State has its own standard. Bellevue has its own standard. Snoqualmie has its own standard. So let's figure out what do we need. What do our people who live in Bellevue? And then people who build here, people who live here, people who come here, understand we can live up to that. We can put up to that. We can accept that. Then there's no surprise, and we will succeed.
Thank you. So what I'm hearing from our council is we have a lot of questions we'd like answered. We'd like to contemplate the bidirectional charging system that was brought up today, as well as, planning for the future and planning for the regional need and capacity. Consider increasing EV capable percentage mandates, and then collaborating with other stakeholders to include PSE. So this has been a really good conversation tonight, which I really appreciate, and you gave us a lot of information. And thank you, Matt, for weighing in. We appreciate that as well, because it helps us look at the big picture. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. As I was listening to my colleagues, I actually remembered there was one thing I forgot to bring up. It was in the report, so if I may. The report said that to establish a citywide EV working group. So I'm curious about what was the timing for that, and in light of this conversation, is it only the city of Bellevue, or would we think about maybe it's a collaboration with Kirkland and Redmond so that we are able to leverage the conversation together instead of working on this alone? So I just wanted to bring that up because I had forgotten to bring that up in my remarks before.
You don't have to answer that now.
And
Yeah,
you don't
we'll
have to
add
answer
that
that
to the
now, but
memory
it's
bank.
something to
Thank you.
look at. And then I do think globally, this is one chunk within that EV roadmap. I don't know about the rest of my colleagues. I think this would be a really good briefing to really better understand holistically that over 100-page report, especially since there's stuff in there about public charging and siting. And so I wonder if my colleagues would be interested in that being a formal briefing to us and not just.
I think that's something we can talk to the city manager about, how best to address that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so do you feel like you've gotten the information you need from tonight?
Yes, we do. And I just want, on behalf of the staff team, want to thank the council for the great conversation tonight, the great questions and the follow-up that we'll be getting into, including all the work with PSC and the stakeholder community out there. So thank you.
Great, well, thank you. Very, very interesting. So that is the end of our agenda. I believe our next meeting is on the 26th, am I right, Charmaine? November 26th? Okay, so we'll see you then, and we are adjourned. Thank you.